Welcome back, everyone. Yes, we are back in our respective home studios. So that is not a reflection on how last week went. We suggested that might be the last ever. No, it was only the first ever together live in studio episode of Bullhorns and Bullseyes, but we're back to our normal format this week, Curtis.
It was a fun in-person episode. We're going to have to do more of those. Maybe we could get some sponsors, and that way we could actually create a studio.
There you go.
Something
I like that idea.
aspirational.
Yeah. So, Curtis, you told me off air that I'm expected to hit it off with our guest today, and I'm guessing it's not because we share a barber or an what is it? An eye doctor.
Ophthalmologist, right?
Yeah.
That's what we'll call it on this show.
Here, let me
Optometrist, maybe that's it. Yeah, put it on there.
That was the word I was looking for. There
it
now
is.
we are more kindred spirits. But why do you think we're going to hit it off so well, Curtis?
Well, so I met Will through a referral, through some colleagues. You know, I come from that IT world, Tom, as you remember, and I get this email out of the blue like 8 months ago. Yeah, I hear you're the guy to talk to with DNS issues. I've got some problems with my email. Will you help me? And so we did this call. I helped him. And then some issues crept up a little while later. We worked through that together, and we were on a conference call like this. And we got through it all. He's like, I want to pay you. How can I pay you? And I was like, no, well, first of all, just leave me a review. It's taking a little bit of our own medicine here, just trying to build our Google reviews. I was like, if you don't mind just taking a couple of minutes to do that. But it's like, you've got this book behind you there. And I'm actually really curious what it is you do and what this book's all about. And so he starts explaining it to me. And I was like, man, this sounds a lot like what my partner in crime talks about, Tom Nixon. And what really struck me was like what he was describing was what you talk about in when you do customer interviews. You want to get to a state of mind of what were they thinking about before meeting that company, that software, whatever. What was it like working with them, and what's life like now? In that sort of those transformational moments. And you turn that into marketing messaging to resonate with other people who are in similar states of mind that likely would go on that same journey, right? So to connect really and hit that messaging, I was like, okay, you guys got to meet, you got to talk. Will you come on our podcast? That's how you're going to pay me. You're going to come on this podcast. And so here he is, Will Leach. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to share my passion, and thanks for having me. I love this stuff. Happy to be on the show.
All right. Well, just so people could tell us apart, I'm going back from my Clark Kent look to my Superman look, or maybe this is Lex Luthor. But Will Leach, yes, that book you were talking about, I presume was Will is the best-selling author of Marketing to Mindsets, which is what you just, I think, described, Curtis. We're going to dive into that today. Founder of the Mindstate Group. So, Will, tell us just a little bit about your experience and what you do day to day relative to what Curtis just introed.
Yeah, so about 25 years ago, I started my career in the world of market research, but just very traditional market research, doing surveys, doing interviews with customers. And I found my way over to PepsiCo back in 2009. And we started really heavily investing in neuroscience and behavioral psychology. I fell in love with the idea of the non-conscious mind and how many of our decisions are made at the non-conscious level. So, you know, it's a classic. Whenever you love your job, especially if you're in a corporation, that's exactly when they want to rotate you to a new critical experience. And what that meant was I may have to go work on oatmeal in Chicago. And I love oatmeal, but I'm not moving the family to Chicago to work on it, or go up to New York. And I was in Dallas. I was working at Frito-Lay at the time. And I thought, you know what? I have this passion. And I know that the vast majority of marketing is broken. I know, because we see all the metrics at PepsiCo. If you want to understand marketing, PepsiCo puts massive amounts of millions and millions of dollars into understanding analytically how marketing works. They had neuroscientists on staff, behavioral psychologists on staff. And I thought to myself, there's so many other companies that don't understand these things. I was trained in it. So I started my company about 12 years ago. And so it's Mindstate Group. So basically what we do is we're a behavioral research consultancy, mostly on the brand communication side. We specialize in understanding non-conscious factors of human behavior. But then what we do is we work with our clients to, okay, so we understand here's what motivates your customers. How do we translate that motivational science or behavioral economics or these different social sciences I'm sure we'll get into? How do we translate that into brand marketing? So that's the world I'm in. It's brought me all over the world. Wrote a best-selling book, like you said, Marketing to Mindstates. And I get to live my passion every day. I love marketing, but more importantly, I love how people make decisions. And so we created a model to help us understand those decisions, but also how to message against those different non-conscious factors.
Are those models outlined in the book?
They are. It's the Mindstate model. It's composed of 4 different parts of decision making.
So Curtis was right in the way that he kind of framed my approach to messaging. Because I think too often, and maybe this is what you've seen, Will, too often companies will just start talking about themselves, how great they are, benefits and features, hoping that's going to wow and impress the reader enough so much that they can't wait to put the product in the cart and check out. And in the B2B world that we live in, for one, the buying process is much more complex than that. And the need is much more complex than transactional. And so what I'm trying to encourage brands to do is just what you said, Curtis, get in the mindset of the people who have already traveled that journey, that ended up at the destination that you wanted, and map it right from the very beginning before they've even heard of you. And if you do that, then you're going to shepherd them into the action of your choosing, but on the timeline of their choosing. So that's my little sermon. Will, what does your book tell us about mind states and how people can sort of not weaponize them, but maybe just put them into optimum mode?
Yeah, and one thing I tell my students, so I teach this Mindstate marketing at SMU down the road. I live in Dallas, Texas, so SMU, as well as Texas A&M's Human Behavior Laboratory. And I always like to tell my students the first thing, and this just seems, if you don't need to understand behavioral psychology at all to understand this premise of what you just said, Tom. So imagine the day you were born, you looked out, and at that moment until the day you die, you are the center of attention. Every time you look up, the entire world is coming into your eyes, right? Every day. So the first thing you got to understand is that you must understand the customer is the center of attention. Why? Because that's how the entire world works around them. And we're all that same. Second thing, and I used to deal with this when I was on the brand team. But the idea is we get so enamored as a brand that we have to find our voice and we have to connect our voice to the customer, whatever. Yet again, let me remind you guys, the number one voice you hear every single day is whose voice?
Your own.
Your voice. It's your own voice. You're talking in your head constantly. Your tonality, what motivates you, what your psychological approach is to problems. And so what we do on the brand side, though, and I worked on the biggest brands in the world. I've worked on Lay's. I've worked on Pepsi. I've worked on Gatorade. I've worked on, these amazing brands. And what happens, and I think this doesn't even happen in the biggest brands, honestly, Tom. I think it happens on even your small local brand. That is the center of your world. So I remember being on Sun Chips. And at that point, Sun Chips, I got transferred on the Sun Chips brand, and it was a healthy snack. Well, I'm not really into healthy snacks. I'm just not. I'm a Doritos, especially back then. I'm a Doritos guy. And so it wasn't necessarily my favorite brand, but I got to do my rotation. So I go to the rotation. And then they decided when I first joined the brand, we're going to change Sun Chips into an environmental brand. So no longer is it a healthy brand. We want to change to an environmental brand. So now all of a sudden I'm like, okay, well, I wouldn't call myself a big environmentalist. So I'm even less excited about being on that brand. You know what happens? Every day you go into a meeting, you go into a cubicle, you go in and you talk to people who live that brand every day. And buddy, you drink the Kool-Aid. You just do. And if you talk about that brand every day and every meeting is about growing that brand, all of a sudden you start thinking to yourself that you are the center of attention. And there is nothing in behavioral science that tells you that you, the brand, is the center of attention. Never, never, never. But yet we're so absorbed in these meetings and it's my business. I got to make money. I got to make revenues. So that's a first issue. You got to remember that your customers are always the center of attention because that legitimately is the fact of the matter and that they're always hearing their voice. So if you think your job is to try to figure out how to connect your brand into their subconscious or whatever, that's not the way you should be thinking about it. What you should be thinking about is what motivates your customers in your industry. And now how do I adjust my brand? Always start with the customer. And the way we do that is through psychological mind states. And all it really is composed of 4 different things. I'm happy to go into details on it. The first thing you have to understand is something called goal theory. But what are your customers' goals? And that's usually goals at maybe the category level. So you want to understand not just their functional goals, which are the things that they tell you about. I want a great tasting snack. I want it to be affordable. I want on-the-go packaging, whatever. Those are great. You should know that by your customers, by the way. because when people tell you what they want, you should put that in creative. Like they're telling you, totally think you should do that. After that, what you want to do is figure out their higher order goals. Higher order goals are those emotional goals that most marketers want to get to. Like how would they feel if they reached those goals? Value, on the go snacking, whatever. What's great about higher order goals is that's where you kind of want to think about campaigns, because that's the emotion you want to evoke in your communication, so that when you feel that way, oh wow, a brand comes to mind, which is the highest level of goals. And this is actually what you're talking about, Tom, I believe, aspirational goals. So we always aspire in every behavior you do. Me getting on this podcast met an aspirational goal of mine. I may not know what it is, by the way, because it's subconscious a lot of times. But if it didn't meet an aspirational goal, I wouldn't have shown up. I would have gone and grabbed a sandwich, right? So your customers are always trying to reach their aspirational goals, which is them at their best day, their best self. And every action is towards getting that aspirational goal in the future, whether that future is a minute from now or 10 years from now, or it's about avoiding things that could make me not reach my goals. So goals are the number one things you should do. Easy to find out, not necessarily easy to implement into marketing. But then motivations, you want to understand motivational psychology, which are 9 motivations that drive human behavior. I like to tell my students that when you, on January 1st, go out and you set your goal list out and you create your resolution list, and by February, you're upset with yourself because you didn't reach your goals of whatever kind, has nothing to do with your goals. Your goals are probably fine. The problem is that you lack motivation to keep going after your goal when a little bit of resistance comes in, right? Friday night, I drank a little bit. Saturday morning, I may not want to go for that run. The run is still an aspirational goal. I just don't have the motivation to keep going when there's resistance. That's motivational psychology. We look at 9 different motivations. Then the third portion of this is called regulatory fit theory. Basically, we are either optimistic when we're going after our goals or cautious when we're going after our goals. Optimistic are things like, I seek a brand, a strategy that will help me maximize good things when I'm going after my goal. That's just optimistic. Or people will be cautious. I seek to avoid bad things or obstacles that could force me to not reach my goal. That may sound like a small detail, but guys, in the framing of your copy, you can have the exact same brand. You can say, buy my brand. Let's say aspirin. Buy my brand, you can avoid headaches. Buy my brand, you can feel better after a long night of drinking. Maybe I'll stop off on the drinking analogies, right? But that's it. But it's the same aspirin. But some people go, no, it's about avoiding a hangover. Other people look at that same aspirin and say, no, aspirin's about getting and recovering faster from an hangover. Same aspirin. But the way you frame up your messaging, you talk about what will help you avoid or what will help you gain, makes your messaging more salient. It just feels more natural. And then the last thing is just behavioral economics. And that is, we have these shortcuts, these triggers that help us make decisions fast and easy. You may have known things like scarcity effect. And scarcity effect is a trigger that we tend to value things that we believe are scarce in nature. So when we say in some sort of an ad, limited time only, at the subconscious level, that tells the mind that, oh man, these are scarce in nature. They must be valuable. I should go probably buy one of those things. Or if you say limit 8 per purchase or per shopping trip, that tells the mind, oh, I'm limited. This must be valuable. So there's all these little psychological, they call them heuristics or triggers that you can use as a marketer. And so in my book, I talk about goals, motivations, approach, and then these triggers. And then ultimately, I bring those things together to identify a mind state. And that's what I use those 4 principles to message against.
Yeah. Awesome. Curtis, it sounds like that's all the science that backs up what I just somehow fell backwards into. That's just because it felt natural.
That's the point.
Right. Yeah. Well, it reminds me of, so a few episodes ago, we did our marketing framework that we work from, which is your why, how, what. So we start with the customer's why, and we talk about how are you different and unique? How do you meet that why? And then what do you offer? Like that's at the end. Okay, what are the products, services, those types of things that you actually offer? We layer on top of that the AIDA model: awareness, interest, decide, act. And we layered on that the RACE model with how are we actually going to plan and measure all of this? Will, I see like us layering, like if we had an overhead projector and we had those transparent sheets, like, I think we could fit your methodology right on top of what we're using, because you are starting with that, like, you know, clarification of what matters to that customer and where their mindset is, and what are they actually seeking, and you've got to start there to actually have any hope of connecting with them, right? And then that needs to be at an emotional level, kind of bringing that down, connecting that to their needs, and then kind of further on down. So as the analytical person myself, and liking process and those types of things, it really does start to come together when I think about it that way.
Yeah, one thing that it reminds me is that, guys, it's very easy to capture somebody's attention. Like, I can scare you. I could throw something sexy up on the on a billboard or whatever. Maintaining attention is very difficult, and that's what we're talking about. Well, you're talking about that, that why, what, how. That's how you can not just capture the attention, but maintain the attention. If you start with the emotions people want to feel, you can keep their attention going longer. And so that's why it's so important to understand these principles, right? It's not about capturing, or I'm sorry, it's about maintaining that attention.
Yeah. And so I heard you say in one of your videos I was watching, 90% of your marketing is not consciously seen. So describe it, because we've talked about, like, Google's got this 7-11-4 rule. We've got 7 hours of content across 11 different touch points and 4 different channels and blah, 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 blah. But, it's this repetitive nature that we have in advertising, particularly in the delivery of impressions. Just that, gosh, what's our reach? How many impressions are we getting? What's our audience penetration? All these types of metrics. But what you're kind of saying is the majority of that consciously isn't seen. It might be there subconsciously, but we want from as marketers, we want the conscious part of it.
Yep. Yeah, it's true. So imagine that, I have, or I ran across a stat that said, we see up to 35,000 advertisements every day. Guys, 35,000. Now, and that's not brand impressions. That's advertisements. It's everywhere. You go to a grocery store, all the packaging, you're driving, think about all the signs, whatever. So you can't remember. I'm telling you, can you imagine remembering 20 brands you've seen already just today? No, but you've technically probably seen thousands of those ads. So there's this thing called the reticular activating system. And it's a part of the brain that basically takes all those ad impressions and subconsciously it sees them all. But it just basically says, I'm going to get rid of all those things that filter. It just filters out the vast majority of marketing. What doesn't it filter? Goals. Because if your brain is looking to see, how can I reach my goals, the first part of my model, it's letting that information become more resilient, or I'm sorry, it resonates more, right? So the fact of the matter is if you don't understand people's goals and what motivates them, the first 2 parts of that model, then the problem is that the reticular activating system, that filter that we all have, that's eliminating so many, the vast majority of ads from ever being even consciously understood or seen, you will always continue to be filtered until you understand how that works. And the way it works, the way to get through that filter is speak to somebody's aspirations and then speak to their motivations. How do you want to feel? So that's the reason why that whole thing works.
I work primarily in B2B. I know Curtis and I share a bunch of clients in B2B, and a number of our clients have products or services that their market isn't even necessarily aware that category exists, right? They solve a problem, but the market's not out there looking for a product because they don't even know that this thing exists, will replace Excel, say, right? There's a lot of SaaS companies that will replace Excel, all the manual time and errors and all that stuff. And so when you lead with features and product descriptions, that the reticular, whatever you just said, is going to completely filter that out because that person doesn't even think they have that need. But if you lead with here's a pain that we solve and it's very common and here's what you're probably feeling, that's going to get through, right? Well, because they're like,
it does.
Oh, they understand me. How did they know I have that problem? I hate doing that. What is this product? How does it work? How is this different than Excel? Oh my gosh, look at everything it does. That's the path you're trying to chart, not, hey, here's my product. Do you want to buy it?
I love what you said. The RAS, that reticular activating system, is primarily focused about pain. And so I call it the bleeding neck problem. Like, what is the problem? If you can message to somebody's bleeding neck problem, they get stabbed in the neck, and all of a sudden, like, they need help. They don't care how good your product is. If you tell them that I can stop the bleeding, they're not looking for, well, does the bandage go around all of it? Is it hyperallergenic? All they want to know is that you're going to stop the bleeding. Now, that's so hard to do, right? Because you got to figure out what it is that bleeding neck problem that they have that you solve. And when you can do that, it bypasses the RAS, and then you get seen. And then of course, then I want to learn how more it works. So it's good to have features. It's totally good to have features. You just want those at the very bottom. Like, you don't care. It's all about, can you stop my bleeding? Yes. Will I get better? I won't die? Yes. Tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. Then the features become important.
And in our market, Curtis, we've been talking about how the data, it varies, but something of the order of 97% of B2B buyers aren't currently in market at this very moment. So what you're going back to the RAS is that if I don't feel like I'm in market, I'm totally probably not ignoring or not even absorbing that. It's coming through. But if you could constantly resonate with somebody on the level that you understand their pain, even if they're not in market now, they're banking that information and it's resonating. And when the time they move themselves into market, which is typically what B2B buyers do, they're thinking of you because they remember that the mouse that took the thorn out of the elephant's foot. Remember that story?
Yes.
You solved the pain. That was a bleeding neck problem.
I solved the pain. It was months and months and months ago, but now you remember that I solved it, Curtis. And so now it's like, okay, I'm ready to market. And I don't even think I need a bid list because I understand that Curtis and company are the ones to remove the thorn.
And so, Will, I think I read this too, where are you focused more than, obviously, on the mindset and not necessarily the persona? Because a lot in marketing, right, we're developing these ICPs, these ideal customer profiles. And yes, there's a description in that of maybe the problem they might be facing, but usually it's like, oh, we're marketing to Sue, who's 54 years old, and she has, she's been in her job for 20 years, and this is her job role, and like all of these characteristics. And yeah, that's great, but it's like you're after something completely different, which doesn't necessarily fit into a persona per se, or does it? I don't know. Describe that.
I like to think of it this way: a mind state overlays on top of a persona. So my clients also have personas: most valuable consumer, brand persona, whatever. And, I would even argue that most personas that I deal with today even have some cool attitudinal information. It's not just the demographics. It'll say things like, but, she also is a mom, and so she enjoys family time on Saturdays, and she knows that having pure ingredients in her lotions, like that gets something in more emotional. I think that's okay. But what a mind state is it overlays on top of those personas that says this. It says, yes, but at this moment, when she is considering your solution, here's her wants, needs, desires, preferences, belief systems, etc. So you have all these things, right, Curtis? You have wants, needs, desires, you have preferences, you have beliefs, you have attitudes, all these things. The problem is that they change all the time. We were just talking before the show started about our kids. When I talk about my son, I am not Will Leach, marketing to Mindstates guy. That's my persona that somebody has. I am dad, right? So in those moments when my son just almost ran out of gas before the show started, I had to go run to the gas station because he didn't realize, or he thought he could drive on a yellow tank for a while. So I had to go to the gas station and get him gas. That moment in time, I have different beliefs. I have different attitudes. I have different wants. So what I do is I use these mindsets. I study these moments in time when my brand clients are saying, okay, we want to sell more lotion. Gave you that example. Great. I will study those people not at the persona level because they're moms. They're all sorts of things. That's great. What I need to do is identify those psychological mind states, temporary mind states that they're under, and what's happening then. So what I actually do is I supplement their personas and I add a whole bunch more richness to it. So that's how I usually use persona work. And like we do archetype work. I don't know if you guys do archetype work, but some of our brands want, am I a hero brand or am I a sage brand? We have to know those too. So I'll even map the psychological mindset because sometimes women or somebody's looking for a sage brand, for instance. Sage is like a brand that's authoritative, smart, think like Gandalf, my little wizard behind me, right? And other times you want a hero brand, think Nike, Adidas, or something that's going to help you make a success. So I also will map these mind states back to brand archetypes. So you can figure out, oh, okay, I am an achievement brand or a hero brand. That's my archetype. How would I message correctly to be able to activate on that mind state? So you can even map those things to archetypes if you wanted to.
Beautiful. Yeah, love it. All right. Let's take a little bit of a veer here. The AAA of Temptation I have in my show notes here, which is, I'm going to let you explain it, but near and dear to my heart. So what is the AAA of Temptation and how is that impacting brands' marketing efforts?
Is that the attribution?
Attribution, algorithms, and arithmetic. Did I
Yep, and
invent that? No,
arithmetic.
you invented that.
Well, I don't know if I invented it, but it is a bit of a thorn in my side. So I came from the world of econometrics. So I did my undergrad in environmental economics, did my master's in econometrics. So I came out in the research world with the belief that data is everything. And I don't necessarily disbelieve that. I think it's important for us to collect data. However, I think as advancements in technology have allowed us to do, say, attribution analysis, right? So I can understand this TV advertisement gave me X% lift. This coupon gave me X% lift, and I can attribute my marketing spend so I can optimize. That was really not available a decade ago, not accurately. And I know because we invested heavily in that stuff, but it was very, very difficult to track. So if somebody said, how successful is your marketing? You're like, well, I'm building brand equity. That's what I'm doing. And then the CEO is like, awesome. Can you tell me how many dollars you brought in? Because I know the sales guy can. Sales guy can totally tell you. It's like, oh yeah, I had 4 calls. I landed 5 clients on those 4 calls. I dropped a coupon. I created this percentage of lift. Very easy in the sales world. Marketing was not like that until technology, mathematics, and mostly technology allowed us to capture those. The problem is that as we've been able to use technology to help us understand attribution and we get these scores and things like that, I believe that we became to start optimizing our messaging around those metrics versus what we just said, what drives human behavior is people. And when it really matters, so I talked to Amazon. I was at a conference. I went to go present at Amazon one time. And I was talking about the Mindstate stuff. And a guy was up there and he said, hey, Will, we don't really need that. And arguably he's right, because he said, I can do A/B testing across millions of transactions in just an hour, and I can optimize my messaging, right? And I said, very fair, you win. You can kind of do that until something happens like COVID. When that happens, people's mind states shifted dramatically. Everything you could possibly want during COVID, and I was tracking these things, guys, was all around empowerment, which is our desire for control or safety. I was looking at candles. I was doing work on candles. Like, does it give me more control? Does it give me more control? That's all people wanted. All that data, if you would have looked at all the candle data, there would not have been anything in there that would have told you that you can sell more candles by saying, hey, my candle company can give you more control. But the fact of the matter is almost every product out there started talking about it's safe for you and it'll give you more control. The successful companies were doing that. Why? It's because they understood human behavior. They understood that people were very anxious. They didn't feel like they had any control because all of a sudden my house is my restaurant. It's my place of worship. It's my school. It's my sanctuary. I mean, the house became everything. And when the house becomes everything, everything needs to feel safe. Amazon, God love him. And that guy, arguably he said the right thing, but I always wonder back, but how would you have ever understood how to test yourself out of that? I don't know if you could have done that. So that's why I believe that analytics are important. In fact, I know they are because now marketers can actually go back to their CEOs and their CMOs and say, hey, we generated this dollar for the business. And I totally get that's important. The problem with that is that we get so focused on those metrics that we forget there's human beings behind those things. And metrics will they will have a difficulty trying to measure goals and motivations and how important those things are to work.
Yeah. And Curtis, as you being the resident mathematician on the podcast, what I love about your approach to data is you look at attribution, algorithms, what's the third one? Arithmetic, not as the end, but as a means to an end. And the end is understanding everything that Will just said so that you can feed it back into your own intelligence, into the intelligence of the algorithms to say, this is what happened, but this is what it means. Now get smart on.
Right. I think the mistake marketers are making is they're optimizing to the algorithm, optimizing to the arithmetic and the math and all those types of things, right? So it's like, hey, I can build you a landing page, a click funnel, or whatever that's going to do this and convert at this conversion rate and all these types of things. But if that doesn't lead to a sale at the other end, what do those metrics even matter, right? And it's like, I can't tell you how many times a client is asking me, well, what keywords should we use? We need to optimize for keywords, right? It's like, at what point did we make the mistake as marketers that we were optimizing for keywords? We should have always been optimizing for customers.
Yeah.
And so get to know your
Amen.
customers. Don't get to know your, it's like the keywords is a secondary part. And yes, I'll give you the best practices you need to make sure that your website is going to get found in Google. But you start with the customer. You don't start with Google. And it's just the same thing. You don't start with conversion rates. You start with getting to know your customer and saying, does this content, does this copy, is this page helpful? All of those types of things.
Well, real quick before you respond to that, Will, what marketers have done, and maybe I'm guilty of this, is sometimes then they would look to implement sort of artificial metrics so that they could gauge success and say, they did this. We had 500 form fills to download our lead magnet. Okay, let's look at the leads. Were any of them good? Well, they all were wrong counterfeit email addresses people were just giving so that they could get a download. Okay, well, so the data looks good. Data looks great.
Did you
Have
feel
we
good about
achieved-
that? Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Look at all these downloads and
Okay.
leads, right? But and that's an extreme example, but you get the point. Well, it's right. It's like, let's not interject artificial metrics just to validate the marketing spend.
No, I agree. I with everything. I love how you said it, Curtis. And I think, you know, I always say they're the two of the scariest people in the world. The first one is your kid's best friend's older brother, because they're going to introduce your kid to things that they should never hear. And the second one is that McKinsey consultant or that BCG consultant who's 24, 25 years old that don't understand anything about marketing and human beings, but they built a new technology they can sell to a major company. Say, we can tell you exactly how to find with mathematical precision how to find this person and message that person. And after a decade of that, guys, I'm telling you that the companies I work with and the large companies in the world, they have come to realize that that is not the end all be all. It's important, but when you say, now, what am I going to say? Okay, so, you know, they know that this keyword may have done really well 2 weeks ago, and that keyword no longer does well. Then what do you do? What's the next keyword? Analytics can try to help you get there, but if you understood the psychology of your customer, you understood that bleeding neck problem, and you knew that they're driven by success. Okay, so rather than using the word success, you may have to modify that word, but you don't know that if you're just using pure data analytics. You're not taking that last final mile of really understanding the why behind that metric. So when things change, when you have to change your messaging, which, by the way, guys, you change your messaging all the time because the brain gets used to stuff. It's no more longer novel. So the brain looks for something different. It still wants to have something that felt compelling, but it just doesn't like the words, the way you articulate it. That's why your ad resonance falls after a while, because it's not novel anymore. The brain figures out, okay, I got it. What do you do next? If you understand your customer, you know what to do next. You just have to tweak that messaging in a way that you know is going to map back to their psychology.
Awesome. So, Will, let's end with this concept of brand attachment, because we've talked in recent episodes, Curtis, about what does life look like in a post SEO world, post search, right? With the, you know, we've been just referencing keywords, and now already this podcast is out of date because we shouldn't be optimizing for keywords necessarily as we used to anyway. But brand attachment is different. That's, I think, going to demark the winners and losers. What is it? And you have 4 rules for building it. What are they?
Yeah, I do. So let's just first talk about brand loyalty. Brand loyalty is incredibly difficult to get because we have so many choices in today's world. We have so many choices. We're constantly being inundated with new brands, new positionings, new brands, new options, etc. So, but brand loyalty, the way to think about brand loyalty, and this, I know we all want to strive for brand loyalty, but I think there's something deeper and better than brand loyalty, and that's attachment. Brand loyalty is the idea is that your brand is trying to connect with somebody's standards or maybe their principles, maybe a value. So traditional brand loyalty is you go do a bunch of work on your customer. You found out my customer values purity. Okay, great. So now what you want to do for brand loyalty is you keep screaming, we're pure, we're pure, we're pure, we're pure. And hopefully you create an association between somebody's standards and their principles and your brand. Here's the problem. We just actually talked about it a couple of minutes ago. Your values and your principles change quite often. In the moment, in fact, it changes a lot. I am a different person when I had a child, and my values changed dramatically once I had a child. My values changed dramatically when I got married. My principles and values, things like they change. They're not nearly as fluid as they are more fluid than we think. So that's why when the pandemic hit and you had outages or whatever, that you saw loyalty scores drop and people would buy anything they wanted to. If somebody was truly loyal to your brand, they would have foregone their toilet paper purchase and they would have waited for their brand of Charmin. Guess what they did, guys? Damn Charmin. I'm going to get toilet paper, right? So you're showing Charmin, like, we've been working on our loyalty for so long. And look, we're looking at our basket data and we know that people are buying outside of Charmin. Yep, they are. It wasn't because you didn't have nearly the loyalty you thought you did. So there's something stronger. It's called brand attachment. So rather than trying to find a connection between a value or maybe a principle that your customers have, attachment connects a brand to the human being at that goals and motivational perspective, because those things don't change, or it's very difficult for those things to change. If, as it comes to whatever you're selling, if you're motivated by success, then that doesn't change even when pandemics happen. Well, in that case, it does change. I mean, it was so dramatically different. But your desire for success for this one category will remain for a long time. So what you do is, if you could connect to somebody's goals, if you say, hey hey customer, I will help you reach your aspirational goals. That thing that you think about or that non-consciously your brain is looking for, and my brain can help you get there, that creates attachment. If I also tell you, oh, and if you use my brand, I'll help you become more successful. I help you feel that you are more confident and successful. That creates almost a person-to-person relationship. It's no longer just looking at a value. It's now looking to a person-to-person attachment. And when you get brand attachment, here's what happens. When the brand goes through an out of stock, or they make a bad move, like Pepsi did a couple of years ago with a commercial with what they did with Kylie Jenner, you can make your brand lovers become activists. They'll fight on your behalf. Why? Because that's my best friend. I associate that brand with the same goals and motivations that I have. So they will actually become activists for you. Those are the types of people that when somebody takes you on a Reddit page and they start talking about your brand, these people jump to your defense. These people, when you get a 1 rating, they jump to your defense. That's that restaurant owner down the street that yeah, that's not fair what they're saying about them. You jump to their defense. Loyal customers don't do that. Activists attaching customers, they will do that. So it's a different level of depth. So don't try to focus on people's values, and what you really want to focus on is what are their core goals, and then what motivates them to reach those goals. If you do that, you have a much deeper relationship.
Yep.
And then I think go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was saying how to get to brand attachment. I kind of already talked about it, right? One, you need to basically grab or to create brand attachment. You need to, one, let them know that they're the hero. We already talked about that. Like, you're the hero. I'm just a person, or I'm just a brand that's going to help you. You're the Batman. I'm the utility belt, right? The second thing you want to do is just make sure you're associating your brand with those motivations. We just talked about that. So you want to make sure that your brand helps you. I will help you, hero, become more successful.
Let me pause you real quick. I want to translate this into our analogy of Star Wars. All right. So start at the beginning. The client is Luke Skywalker. That's the hero. We've been saying Han Solo is the brand, right? So, okay, now continue.
Yeah, no, that's it. That's right. That's exactly right.
The utility belt in this case was the Millennium Falcon. That was the utility.
It's just a tool. It's a very important tool. A very important tool to the whole story. But technically, in Luke Skywalker's mind, he would have found a way. Right?
Exactly.
Because he's the hero. But the tool was Han Solo with the Millennium Falcon, right? Getting Darth Vader, and then therefore he could drop the bomb, right? So that's a big thing. You have to realize that you are the asset, you're the tool, and tools are very important. Batman's utility belt is incredibly important, right? But ultimately, your hero is your customer. And then we talk about temporal landmarks. I won't beat this into the ground, but there are times where people seek their aspirational self. You know this by, at least I'm going to talk for myself. Every Monday morning I wake up and I look at my body. I'm like, man, I got to go on a diet, man. I've got to start working out. So if a brand around health and wellness, working out, if they message to me on a Monday morning, a temporal landmark, they're more likely to grab my attention than on a Friday night when I'm at a Five Guys, right? That's not a good temporal mark. So these things called temporal marks, landmarks. So it's the first of the month. It's the first of the year. It's when you reach a 50th birthday. It's when you have a life-changing event, like I got diagnosed with cancer, or I got married, or there's an anniversary, or it's the start of spring. There are these moments in time, and you can read about this by Dan Pink. He's done a whole book called When. It's a really cool book about when and time has a big impact on our abilities to to want to make change. So if you want to have brand attachment, you want to create that attachment. You want to think about what are these temporal landmarks in your customer's day. Maybe it's a Monday morning. Maybe it's the first of the month. Maybe it's, like I said, the beginning of spring. When you message at those moments, you're more likely to get a deeper connection because the person is thinking about their aspirational selves. They're open to new ideas. So that's a third and final, really the fourth way to build brand attachment.
Well, Curtis, did it turn out the way you hoped? I mean, we are kindred spirits, this Will Leach guy and I.
Yeah, this podcast could continue on, and maybe we will have a part 2 at some point. But definitely,
there was a part 2 to Star Wars, as I recall.
That's right. We'll go through all
and
6
3 and
all 9
and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep.
So, well, this sounds like a fascinating book, Will. So, where can I go get it?
Yeah, so you can find Marketing to Mindstates on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart. It's pretty much available in any online store. And there's even an Audible version. But I will tell you guys that the voice ended up not being mine. I couldn't stand hearing my voice, so you may hear a comedian's voice if you download it. If you buy it on Audible, you may recognize the comedian's voice that actually did the voiceover.
Ooh, that's what they call a tease in this business, Curtis.
Yep. I'm gonna pick it up right after this show with my my Audible subscription.
Yeah,
perfect.
Good. There you go.
All right, and we'll link to that. We'll link to the Mindstate Group's website. So thanks, Will Leach, for being on the show. Like we said, to be continued. And what did they say in Star Wars? Was it go forth and prosper? No.
Oh, Star Trek. Oh, you got all the guys so upset.
I did. And that's how we'll leave you this week on Bullhorns and Bullseyes.